Was it through this kind of connection between shamanism and Buddhism? I know you spent time doing kind of sweat lodge rituals. Was that where your interest came from?
Well, no, not actually not.
Okay.
It was a coincidence. Although I will say, I don't think I would have understood that intermediate realm if I hadn't met up with the poet Gary Snyder. Do you know who Gary Snyder is?
Oh, I've been a huge fan of Gary Snyder since I was a teenager. That's
oh my
exciting
God.
to be talking to someone who's met him.
Yeah, well, there you go. So before I did any meditation or whatever, when I was 20 years old, my first time in Japan, I was a university student. I mean, I met Buddhist monks and it was interesting. I didn't practice at that time. I was just a student, getting drunk, having fun, whatever is what you do. So one of my Japanese friends said, there's an American guy I think you should meet. He's been here for 12 years doing Zen, and I think you and he have a lot in common. And he speaks Japanese very well. So, and the poet. So I said, cool, yeah, introduce me. So it wasn't a name I knew. It was, so I met Gary. And sure enough, we hit it off and we did have a lot in common. And we had a lot of fun. And, we would walk around and grok Japanese culture in the city of Kyoto, etc. So later on, over the course of years, we had different interactions, not a whole lot. But when I started to actually practice meditation, they have what in Japanese, a phenomenon that in Japanese is called makyo. I don't know if you've encountered that term, M-A-K-Y-O. Well, it basically means you're in the archetypal realm and you're seeing, hearing, and feeling a lot of weird shit. So I was talking to Gary about makyo, and he gave me this sort of 3-layer concept of consciousness that is the Buddhist concept, but just the way he described it to me was very clear. It's like there's surface consciousness. It's traditionally called the Nirmanakaya. It's the conventional world of objectification. I'm over here and embedded in a materiality over there. That's the surface. We can call it the Nirmanakaya in Sanskrit, the body of appearance. Then there's at the depths something that's not really inside time and space. It generates time and space. If you wanted to think of it as a thing, you could think of it as the activity of emptiness. It's formless, doing, impermanence, vacuity, but also energy and connectivity, and fulfillment and safety are associated with your ability to contact that. We could call it the source or the Dharmakaya, the body of the absolute. In between, there's all sorts of phenomena that can occur. It's called the Sambhogakaya. And you can take a Freudian view that it's the cellar of all your impurities. You could take a Jungian view that it's the world of gods, ghosts, ancestors, dreams, and archetypal inspiration. Both views are present in Buddhism. So he sort of gave me this model. And then so Gary, you can perhaps tell your fans more about him, but he was one of the really first people in the 1950s with, well, you know, Earth Household, the whole idea of ecology, whatever. I mean, he was there 20 years before anyone else. So he, of course, had connections with native culture, whatever, and he pointed out to me that how you relate to that intermediate realm is sort of represents the spectrum of classical shamanism, from people that are basically wizards, you know, healers with just power, but not purification or insight. And then there's people that may not even have powers or healing, but they're holy because they're holy. They're whole and they are a whole. And people can see that. And then there's the whole spectrum of, well, mixtures of the powers and the purification, insight, no self thing. So you've got all these oblique angles, and it's like, oh, now it all makes sense. So I have to thank Gary Snyder for like, you know, waving his hands and showing me this is how consciousness works.